sea green color. This is made from ultramarine blue, reddy white with a little phthalo green. And I even put just a little touch of umber in it, not much, just to tone it down. And I'm going to cover the entire canvas in the sky area with this. Just filling it in. Going to float some other colors into this, using this somewhat like I do my reddy white at times. Okay, bring it right on up. Right on down into here, just a little spot there. Now I'm going to switch over and pick up some blue. This is ultramarine blue and white. Got a little touch of umber in it, and give a little darker color at the top of this sky. A little bit darker up into here. Maybe even streak it down at an angle. Something about like that. Now, I think I may have gotten that just a little darker than I like right in the center, so I'm going to pick up some reddy white and simply add right in there. Just a little bit more reddy white. And that'll lighten it right on the canvas, you see. And isn't that simple? Now I'm going to put some little dark shadows and some areas for the clouds. I'm actually just going to throw in the shadows of the clouds. And once this is dry, we're going to come back and show you how to put the bright, puffy pink ones in. I'll start right in here and just kind of scumble that in with my fan brush. Maybe another one right into there. One up into this area, just at random across the sky. I do have a plan, and the plan is to kind of lead your eye into the palm tree. So something about like that. I have laid it up, and I'm going to use this is what I call a foliage stippling brush, but I'm going to use it as a blending brush today because it has many, many purposes, and I'm going to lightly blend these colors in. Just kind of fade them in just a little bit, something about like that. I'm going to dry this brush just a little bit, clean them out so that I can go back and smooth it down just a little bit without painting so much, because after you use it to blend a little bit, it gets so much paint in the brush that instead of blending, you're painting, you see. So you need to clean the brushes quite frequently. And I use an old towel. An old terry cloth towel is the best thing. Paper towels are fairly nice, but sometimes they'll leave little lumps of paper in your brush and you get it in your paint. Now I'm going to put a little bit of this around the edge at the bottom of the sky. Kind of throw in just a little hint of this. People refer to these as the Bahama Banks, or clouds that hang right at the horizon. I'm going to maybe just use my fan brush to scumble those in real quickly. Just mixing it in there, and that's still nice and wet. Because it has so much reddy white in there, it'll stay open a long time. It'll keep a lot of moisture in this paint for a long time. Now I'm going to go down and lay in the backdrop for our water. Start out maybe with some of this lavender color that we've used up in here. This little purplish gray color that I used for those clouds was red, cad red medium, ultramarine blue, and reddy white. I'll start with it. Bring it in, something about like that. Going to change values once in a while, maybe a little greenish color next. Laying that in. Maybe a little darker green. This is just blue and green. Ultramarine blue with a little phthalo green in it. Right in there. Then I want to switch back in. I haven't used any of the blue that I had in the sky. So why don't I use it next? There we go. And we have a peach color that I have made with cad yellow medium, cad red medium, and reddy white. And I'm going to scoot this on the beach down into here and let the water and the sand come together. Actually, I'm just going to switch over and get me a big old brush and go ahead and put this in quickly because there's so much of it. And I can do that really fast if I'll just work it in. There we go. Bring it right on back into there. Hook those colors together just ever so slightly. I missed just a little spot over here, and I'd like it to kind of fade away anyway. So I'm going to pull some Ready White in right there. Yeah, that's it. Now I'm going to shape in the dune. I want a little shadow coming down through in here, and I want some lights back in there, so I'll use the same little peachy color to start laying in the back side of this dune and the top, or the front edge and the top of this dune, right through in here. And I'm going to use this little cloud color that I had used in the sky as the shadows, you see. Now, I'm just laying in a backdrop for this painting. This is not the finished product, you see. It's only a backdrop for the colors that we're going to be using. Maybe a little bit more with that. That's got a little more red in it. That might be pretty. And I'll work these colors together just ever so slightly right into here. I'm going to have some trees. I think maybe I'll pull that out a little bit right in there. And take a little white and come back and give me like a little reflected light coming down off that dune. That looks good. We're going to put a little bank of trees back in here, and I have mixed some dark color. This is phthalo green. It has some brown, blue, red, about every color. And I'm going to tone it down with some of my grays and get me a real fade-away color and start punching in a little background of trees over into this area. Maybe even pull it out by the water just a little bit, you see. And that's right there. That looks good. And I'm going to kind of haze it down in there with a little white and some of this peach color. And start putting the grass on. I'll just darken that color just a little bit, and I'm going to start tapping some grass on this dune. Add a little more color to that, and a little more grass on this dune. Now, the darkest grass that you're going to see in the painting is not going to be applied until after the dune is dry, so that I can get a nice, sharp focus look to the painting. Yeah, something about like that. Now, I do have some little gaps in my paint here, so I'm going to come back and work this area right there. Okay, let's put a little pink and white in here. I'm going to add just a little red and white together, actually it is, and make a little pink color, and come in and maybe put us a little trail coming in here, like a little path coming down to the beach. Indicate a little trail, and maybe even a little bit of this kind of a little pinker color across the front of the dune to accent some of that, maybe a little bit out into this area. We're going to dry this. I'd like you to look at the other painting, and we'll be right back. This is dry enough now. While we were gone, I took the liberty to go ahead and sketch in a little bit of the palm trees, but we're going to start in the sky, and we're going to highlight the clouds, and we'll work our way down on this. I'm going to start the clouds by adding a little red, yellow, and white, and kind of tapping it together. I may even use a little bit of that peach color from the sand, and just tap those colors together so that I get little spots of white and little spots of other colors. I'm going to scumble it out with a clean towel, just kind of tap, filbert brush. It's a bristle brush. Let me see, I think I'll start right in here. And I'll just tap these clouds on kind of crazy and at random. Take this little brush and come back and scumble it in and create the illusion of a little cloud, leaving the shadow untouched. I'm going to leave that shadow under there and just kind of scumble that out and leave it. I like a little more white once in a while, so I'm going to go back and hit just a little dab of white in there. Maybe tap that around. Move over to here and kind of see if we can't get this one in real quick. Add a lot of interest to the sky with this little hot pink color. Isn't that pretty? And notice how erratic I move this brush. I try not to do the same thing all the time. Just make it just pat around sometimes and then draw little circles and pat some more. Erratic strokes all over the place. scumble it right on through there. Now, doesn't that look like fun? Yeah. Clouds are really easy to do if you just relax and enjoy them. Yeah. Maybe a little scooter down into here. We want them smaller as they come toward the horizon line. Remember, we always do that. Adds a little depth to the sky. Maybe this fellow will kind of bring him in something about like that. There we go. Just a little white on that one to make him show up real pretty in that area. And I'm going to move back over into here and get us another little cloud or two on the other side. Don't want all the clouds on one side of the canvas. That wouldn't hardly work, would it? Something back in there, maybe a little scooter right in here. Then we're going to move back down to the Bahama banks that we put in. Do basically the same thing to them. We're just going to tap around a little pink in there and scumble this around, giving it the illusion of a little turbulence from the clouds down into there. Notice that I only put on a little bit at the time, because if I put this paint all over and then go back to scumble, it would begin to dry, and some spots would not scumble out as well as you'd like them to. So just apply one little spot or two at the time and then move around. There we go. Now, doesn't that change that sky tremendously? It's getting really pretty now. Just a little bit over into here. Don't want too much in this area. Don't want your eye on that side. Want you to stop. The eye to stop here at the palm trees and not run out of the painting. So I'll just kind of scumble that around real quickly. Now we're ready to work into the water. I'm going to start the white caps way out into the ocean with my liner brush, and I'm going to tickle the bottoms of them with either a fan brush or an angle brush and make it sit down on the water. Just a few little white caps right out into there. I put up the little white line. It looks like a little water snake or something until I come under and just kind of tickle its little tummy. Kind of soften the bottom edge down and make it a part of that water. A couple of these back into there, and then we'll move on down and do the big waves. We don't need a lot of those, and I want to stagger those. Don't want them all in a row. If you put them all in a row, it begins to look like wallpaper, you see. So you want it to have a little variety. I'm going to use my white now, and I'm going to stipple the top of this big wave. And I'm going to do it in an erratic fashion. I don't want it all just a perfect little row. Maybe across over into there. And a little bit, I'm going to dip it down. We're going to have a little curl to that wake right there. Come back in and pick up some of this little dark, but I'm going to add a lot of water to it. It's almost like a wash, you see. And come right up underneath there, just like that. Soften that bottom edge just a little bit. And with that color in the brush, I'm going to pull down one little stroke at a time and create that little wave. Right in there. But I want some of this water to spill over. And I'll lay my hand on the canvas and I'll pull that little spilled over part right through there. I had a little too much on my brush, so take a little off that fan brush, pull it right back in. Now, oftentimes I pull too much. I did pretty good today, but the common problem people have is they pull too much, so if you do, you just take a little of your dark and lift it right back, right in there, and that pushes it back. Now we're going to move on down and do some water washing in on the sand. I think I'll start out here and just kind of put a couple of little places where there might be a little rock or something there, and I'm just going to scoot that back, just like that. Lay in a place for something. The big wash-ups on the sand are going to come in something like this. I'll start the first one, maybe one right through there. Notice how I'll reach above it. Now, instead of tickling the bottom, I come off the top side. Scratch its back, sort of, you see. And that makes the water recede and go back toward the ocean. Another little wash-up. I'll doorstep these down. Now, watch this. See how I'll doorstep this down? And it doesn't look like much just yet, but when I take my fan brush and I streak off the back side, and notice that every stroke of this fan brush is horizontal. It goes parallel to the bottom edge of the canvas. and that causes that water to lay flat. Now, if I lift it up like this, you see it would look like the water was lifting. And if I pull down, it would look as though it's running downhill. So it must go straight. That's important. Now I'm going to pick up a little of this brown maybe and some of this white and orange and things and come back out in here and tap a little rock or two out into that surf, back behind some of those little spots of white that we put in. I even like to put a little blue and white on that. So here we go. I'll put a little blue and white and just kind of add a little shimmer or something to this beach. And we're about ready to move over and start working on our palm trees. Before we leave this area, I think I am going to put in a little bit of debris. Now, there's a tide line usually. It's where the seaweed, the kelp, and different things float up on the beach. And it kind of lays there in a little line. I think I'll put a little bit of that in there. Always adds a little interest if you just put a little something on your beach. I even put a little stick or two, maybe like a little piece of driftwood or something, just kind of caught up in that. And that adds something. We've pre-mixed a little green over here. We talked about it earlier. It's a dark, dark green color made out of phthalo green, ultramarine blue, umber, and even a little bit of red. It's got some of every color in there just about on this palette. And I'm going to go ahead and start touching up my grass. Tap back in here, maybe bring a little bit around this palm tree that we're going to put in, and establish the rest of the grass across the bottom of this canvas. There we go. Notice that I first of all put in a pattern for the grass, then I'll lift up a little bit. But I'm just establishing a pattern. I want to darken in the corners pretty good. That keeps your eye in the painting, you see. Yeah. And I'm going to lift up. My detail work will be done with the liner brush down here anyway. Just kind of want to get a base in here for it. There we go. At random, just kind of streak it in a little design. There we go. Now that should be drying as we're working on the palm tree. I'm going to start on the distant palm trees with a little umber, and I'll stir it into some of this highlight color that we've been using here. And we'll pull in a few little palm tree trunks back into there. A few of those. Switch over to my angular brush, and I'm going to load with umber and pick up a little white or something, and I'll put this little palm tree trunk in. Now I've got one more that I'm going to put in. It's this big one up front, and I'm going to do him in two steps. I'm going to use the umber and chop him in just a little bit like this with the umber. That paint's a little too thin, so I'm thickening the paint. I'm going back and picking up more pigment. And bring that little tree right on down in there. To highlight him, I'm going to just add a little of this highlight color off my palette, which is the peach from the sand, and maybe a little white. And I'll just tap it and give it a little texture as I come down. A little tap, tap, tap of that color. And now we have a palm tree trunk. Now I do the basic of the palm trees, and they need a shadow too. While I'm here, I think I'll throw in that shadow. A little blue and umber and maybe even a little red. Get me a little darker color and hook a shadow back behind that old palm tree. Maybe this one would cast a shadow right over there. And I'll blot them just a little bit so that they'll be a little softer and soft. Not so definite. If you'll notice up in the sky where I have transferred just a little pattern for where I'm going to put my palm tree fronds, I use those as a guide, and I start my palm trees with this fan brush. Gonna just put on a little bit of the palm fronds with the fan brush. The majority of it is going to be done with my liner brush because I get a much more skilled and detailed look. And I'll put these in quickly, work on a couple of the other trees, and allow this to dry just a little bit so that I can come back and work in here with my liner brush, you see. Because that's not the finished product there. That's just to get me started. Over into this tree, I'm going to pull out some little fronds on him. Just he's smaller, and he's not going to be near as detailed. But I do want to get him started with this fan brush too. I'll get him started. But I need to lighten for the ones way off in the distance. Maybe a little of this gray and some of these light shades and get it very, very pastel. And I'm making all the fronds billows, kind of blow to the same direction. Because that's the way the wind's blowing. There we go. Now that's pretty good. Don't want too much detail over there. That's a little too dark even, and I'm going to blot and take a little bit of that off. That looks good. Now the detail of these palm trees is done with this liner brush. I'm going to start out with a dark. A lot of moisture in the liner brush. And look at the difference that it makes. Look how much nicer that looks. You see, all of a sudden it begins to look really pretty. And I do every one of those that way. I don't usually paint quite as fast. I usually take my time a little bit more. Sometimes I'll even indicate the stem that runs down the palm frond. Hear my fingernail scratching? I use that so that I don't hit the canvas too hard and get a little smear. Okay, right through there. I'm going to use 2 or 3 shades of highlight on this. I usually start out with a little yellow mixed in with my dirty brush, little tad yellows. And I'm going to add a little red to it, maybe even a little brown, and give me some dead-looking fronds in there. But that's beginning to look pretty good. A little too dry there. Oops, when you get it too dry, you need to stop quickly because it just isn't as pretty if you don't get that little transparent look to some of that paint. There we go. Right over into here. Throw a few of those little stems back in there, a little more detailed. But not too much. Not as much on that one as I did to this. Now I'm going to get that yellow. Moving a little fast here. And white. Maybe a little bit of that dirty. And pull out a few of these little light ones on this palm tree. Right on the edge. Not going to go all the way around the tree, just one side, a little bit on this one over here. The ones way in the distance, I'm not even going to highlight those. I'm just going to leave them as they are. Throw a little of that red in there. Turns that peach, you see. Pretty, 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 isn't it? Pretty as a picture. See, you can do that. It's just one little thing at a time, and you just add to it. You need to back away once in a while and look at what you've got, and then decide if you need to add some more, because oftentimes you'll get a little too much in there. Now I'm going to put a bird in the distance. I'm going to pick up some of this dark color over here, double load it with my white, lay my hand on the canvas, and put me a little bird coming in. A couple of these little fellows. That one didn't show up too good. Maybe one over to here. And I want to move down into here and work on some of my grass. We need several shades in there, and I want to put a little more detail in that water, maybe a little white, and draw some lines out into here. Look at that. See how transparent it makes that water look? Pull us a little line down in there. Little details like this add an awful lot. Yeah, there we go. The dark of the grass, and I'm going to lift these up. And these need to lift up and bend just like the palm trees in the same direction, you see. There we go. Maybe even bring one up over that little line. See, when you overlap something in the foreground over something in the background, how it pushes it back in the painting? Just one little line will do that. Okay. And I want to speckle this. I'm going to throw a little sand on the beach now, come into some of these colors, and just flip it like this, very light in the background area. And I'm going to use some of the dark in the foreground. Just a little flip in here from the fan brush. I hope you've enjoyed this today and you've learned a lot, and you'll paint your favorite vacation spot. Come and paint with me again.
To get a full-color instructional book prepared by